I'm LaRaesha Kugel. I am the MTSS Facilitator and Instructional Coach at ESU 9. I know I am amongst my peers, so I actually don't have to explain what MTSS is and what that means. We were just talking at a table, like how awkward it is when people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, it's an acronym. So, but we know we do what's best for kids. And so today I'm going to talk about how we can do what's best for kids by making communication our superpower. So I'm not going to be on this the whole time, but sometimes you need to just stand up. And I know that I want to see everyone. I want to see you guys. Also, I'm in a cape. So if I can't stand up and pretend to fly now, I don't know when I can. But the real superhero here is Crucial Conversations. It is this book, and I have read it. I have listened to the audiobook. I have done 2 trainings on it through their program, and I just think everyone, like I know I'm amongst my peers as educators, but it's actually created for the business world. And so I'm modifying it to really meet our business world, because the business of education is totally different than the business of anywhere else. But also, as I kept listening to it and the examples and testing it out on my husband, I just kept thinking, like, we need this in our schools. Like, these elements work for everyone. They even work for our kids. They work for our colleagues. And so that's kind of been my mission, is how can we make conversations and communication our superpower so that we can support and build a team. He really, like, I'm serious. Dr. Brown, like, set me up on so many pieces. Like, I was writing them down, like protecting our mouths from our brains. We're going to be talking about that. And let's see, the empathy gap. We're going to be touching on those pieces. And so I am so, like, I was built up before, but I'm like ready to like fly out of here. But I'll stay in. Plan of attack. Our plan of attack today, we're going to talk about what is a crucial conversation, right? I'm going to talk like I was actually, while I was practicing, I'm like, somebody's going to be in the back, like tallying, like how many times has she said crucial conversation? I'm sure it's going to like all blend together by the end. Where does it fit in the MTSS framework? And then our main piece is the elements of a crucial conversation. Now, I mentioned that I read the book, listened to it, and took 2 trainings, and I have an hour with you. So I am condensing it. There are pieces that I'm not going to get to. And at the end, I'll have my bit.ly for all of these slides, but I also have my contact information. And so reach out to me. I love to help others. I have some resources that just didn't make the cut. And so if you're really looking for something to really implement this, reach out. And then finally, leaving with a plan of action. How are we going to implement this into the work that you're doing every day in your school? Oh, okay. Panicked moment there. Whew. Speaking of kryptonite, what's your conversational kryptonite? What gets in your way? For me, what that might sound like for me is when I feel like I'm no longer being heard, I stop talking. I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm not going to waste my breath. Like, that's my kryptonite. I go to silence. So I'm going to give us just 1 minute. And I want you to turn and just talk to somebody next to you. What is your conversational kryptonite? Go. Who wants to share? You can share yours or the person next to you. It's okay to throw them under the bus. Or Katie on Zoom, go ahead and unmute and let me know what you guys have had in the chat. What are some of our conversational kryptonites?
Yeah, in the chat, we have someone who also goes silent and who has read that book for leadership training and highly recommends it to everyone.
Wonderful. Great. Welcome. Yeah. If you feel like you're being misinterpreted, I'm just not going to say anything. Yeah, like 2020 has the best comebacks, right? Like not the year 2020. We don't want that to come back. Hindsight being 2020. You have the best comebacks. I know. And you're like, oh, I should have said that. That would have been best dig. Absolutely. Been there. Okay, well, we're actually not alone. Where people, Jill here said, hey, you actually took mine. I do silence. The other one, I will talk about, I don't do violence. The other one, why that comes in is because there are two. There's silence and verbal violence. And if there's one thing I don't love about this book is that it states, and I don't have the like correction for it. Like I don't have the suggestion to modify, but they say there's silence or verbal violence, but verbal violence feels very aggressive. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's shouting, but sometimes it's sarcasm. That doesn't feel like violence to me. Like that feels like extreme. Sometimes it's a snide remark. Sometimes it's just being rude. And that's where I'm like, oh, that feels very heavy. So you'll hear verbal violence, but know that it is a big umbrella where what I would say verbal aggression falls under. So do some other verbal things. It's negative talk is what they consider verbal violence. It also rhymes really well, silence, verbal violence. So I think they kind of ran with that too. But what is a crucial conversation? We've all had them. You might have had them this week. Today, I mean, it's still pretty early, but maybe. And there are three components with a crucial conversation. The first one is that it's high stakes. There's a decision that has to be made. And that decision is going to impact others. I know we never make those in education, but just pretend. Where there's opposing opinions. If you agree, you're probably not having a conversation about it. And also where there's strong emotions. So knowing what a crucial conversation is, we're all like, oh yeah, we've had 7 of those this week because we are passionate about what we do. We are passionate about what we think is best for kids. But if you are in a district, one of the lucky ones where everyone agrees on what is best for kids, you're probably in a district where somebody is not speaking up. They're going to silence. And so that's where it's so important that we address these crucial conversations, that we have them, but that we can have them respectfully. In the training, one of the trainers said, we feel like we have 2 choices when we have conversations. We can be respectful or we can be honest. But what crucial conversations really digs into is how can we be both? How can we say our side of the story, and how can we honor theirs as well? And so that's really where that goal is, because when we have crucial conversations, oh, no, that's not it. There we go. We have 3 options. We can avoid them. Been there. Silence. It's my superpower. Not anymore. Face them and handle them poorly. Who's literally thinking of a situation right now? And we can face them and handle them well. And if you aren't thinking of, ooh, I had that, you're going to leave today with some tools. Because this fits so nicely in the MTSS framework. So when we think about the 6 elements, we're going to break them down. What are crucial conversations that we know or may or have arisen from each element? So let's just start with shared leadership. What might be a crucial conversation that would come from that area of shared leadership? So you're trying to create shared leadership, a space of shared leadership, and here's the seat at the table, and they're like, we're good, you just tell us what to do. We know that that does not create a successful MTSS practice. So just the resistance to shared leadership. What else? I've been in situations where shared leadership is not on the table, where I'm not invited to the table, right? The fact that it's not happening, there's still a crucial conversation that needs to happen there. What about, this is your freebie, communication, collaboration, and partnerships? Where could a crucial conversation come from there? Not all at once, okay? We have Zoom to consider. Parents and other staff members, absolutely. When we're communicating this, are we doing it well? Are we inviting other people? Are we looking at other people's perspectives? What about evidence-based practices? Curriculum adoption. What intervention to use? Fidelity. Absolutely. Coaching or evaluations. Absolutely. Those are all crucial conversations that happen because those are high stakes, right? When we adopt a curriculum, that's a hefty price tag and you're stuck with it for a while. So even with interventions, when we put these plans in place, there's a time commitment to that immediately, but also in the future. And we all have our own opinions on what we think would be that amazing system to put in place, but we don't all think it's the same thing. Great. What about building capacity and infrastructure? Differing ideas on what building capacity looks like. I've had a handful of educators in my 3 years of being an MTSS facilitator say, I don't do MTSS. Well, it's not a verb, so that's fine. But we get resistance, right? There's resistance just when I've even in as a joke been okay, it's MTSS, but don't leave. Don't turn off your brains because it has this negative connotation. And so when we're building capacity, we already have people who have checked out. What about layered continuum? Why do I have to put those supports in place? That's not my job. That's not coming from me. I'm quoting someone. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's not my job. I'm in secondary. We don't do MTSS here. And I don't have an interventionist. So not much I can do, right? We get that resistance piece. Absolutely. The least restrictive environment. There have also been schools I've worked in where they said, the data will tell us the student needs support in a specific area. And they're oh, it's okay. He has an IEP. Oh, cool. So 15 minutes of support a day, is that really going to get him where he needs to be? And I think it's hard because we think that IEP is a saving grace. But we know that layered continuum means really good core instruction, really good targeted intervention. And if those students need it, then that specialized support. But that can't be the end all be all. We don't throw the rest out. So that's a crucial conversation we could have. And then database problem solving. I know, everyone loves talking data. We never have conversations about that. What do I do with this? Absolutely. How do I take this and make it worth something? Here it is. I don't know what to do with that. Great. So it fits in all 6 elements. We have crucial conversations that may or may not be happening, but they still need to happen. Because in order to have that building, that communication, collaboration, that teamwork, everyone invested in the process, we have to have the harsh conversations, which I go to silence. Like, this is not my comfort zone, and they sold me, so it's good. So what is a crucial, what are the elements of the crucial conversation? So remember, we're going to make this our superpower. So I am going to show you how crucial conversations can be your superpower. We talked about silence and verbal violence, and we have to get past those, and we have to create safety. And in that white circle, that's where we have good shared understanding. That doesn't mean agreement. We might never agree that this curriculum is better than this curriculum, but we have to come to a shared understanding, a shared purpose. So before we even have the conversation, we have to, protect our mouths from our brains, as Dr. Brown would say. So how are we going to do that? We're going to talk about how we can get unstuck and how we can master our own stories. And then during, 2 things happen, because there's 2 parts to a conversation, right? 2 parts. I'm serious. He set me up so beautifully for this. Start with heart, state your path, and make it safe. But they have a side too. And if we want to make this an impactful, crucial conversation, we have to learn to look for when people don't feel safe. So I literally one time was in a meeting and my teammate knew I stopped talking and she said, "LaRaesha, are you okay?" Because she knew as soon as I stopped talking, I didn't feel safe anymore. And it's not that I felt attacked, it's just I didn't feel heard. We have to seek mutual purpose. Once again, that does not mean agreement. And explore others' paths. And then we move into action. And that, right, is how it becomes your superpower. That is Captain America's shield. You guys are not as excited as I was when I made this. Canva is a dream, and my 4-year-old would be so proud of me right now. So this is, and we can't get through it all. I wish I could, but we're going to focus on the main 5, and we'll even do a little bit move to action. That's why I said I'm going to leave you with my email address, because there's just not enough time for me to go through all the pieces. But before we open our mouths, we have to choose a topic. And so that brings me to the dandelion dilemma. Parents in here, my 7-year-old is almost 8 and ready to be independent and do chores. We're like, okay, you're going to 2nd grade, time to earn your keep. And so this summer we were like, okay, you now get to do the stuff that mom doesn't want to do, which is pick weeds. I hate it. And so we gave him a bucket and we said, when this bucket is full of weeds, you get $1. And so he showed up with a bucket, and then a week later, our yard was full of dandelions again. Why was our yard full of dandelions? Huh? Oh, the seeds, that could be. What did he pick? He just picked the top. handpick the roots. They're gonna come back. And so we had to teach him to get down into the roots and also not blow those. They're great for like images, but please don't blow dandelions around my yard. If we keep just picking off the dandelion and don't get to the root, it's not going away. It's going to keep growing, and it might grow back even stronger because now its roots are stronger. If we don't address the right issue, it's going to continue to arise. And so the brilliant authors are like, we know, let's make an acronym. There's not enough of those in education. Also, please don't use this kind of CPR in an emergency, more like an emergency conversation. But we have to decide if it's a content issue. That's usually like a one-time deal. And that's usually if we just don't understand how. Usually if we have a content issue, we can say, okay, this is the expectation, or this is what it looks like. And then that's as simple as it is. But sometimes it's a pattern issue. Sometimes we're seeing this resistance over and over and over again, and it's beginning to impact student success. Then we have to address that it's a pattern. We can't say, okay, this time you resisted giving the student support. We have to explain that we are seeing a pattern and we're concerned about that. And sometimes all of those lead into what really has to be addressed, which is the relationships. If this is hindering relationships with colleagues, with students, with parents, with leadership, we have to address that first before we address the patterns and the content. So when in doubt, ask yourselves, what do you really want from the conversation? Do you want to address just that one situation, or do you want to get to the root of the problem? And then what is the root of the problem? There are some good planning activities that go with this that I just don't have time. I'm just skimming the surface on this. So if this is something you're like, I want more information, reach out to me. Okay, Dr. Brown talked about, what does our brain do? Our brains were created to survive. So we have to make judgments. They just naturally do that. And so when we see and hear something, we tell ourselves a story. And that story connects to feelings. And then we act. And not acting is actually a form of action. We're restraining ourselves from something. And so we have to look at what are the facts and what story are we telling with that? He talked about, it's always me, right? I'm the victim. Things always happen to me. He had a word for it. I wrote it down. The vulture that's always looking for the negativity, right? That would be the victim mindset. Villain. What was really an aha for me for the villain piece is we often can catch ourselves if we are calling that person a name. So I'm going to be like family friendly here. That jerk rolled their eyes at me again. It's a lot easier to attack somebody that we dehumanize. And so when we catch ourselves calling names, even if it's not to their face, it still counts. We are creating a villain story. And some are helpless. Why should I try? I'm never going to make them happy. As soon as I do it, there's going to be a new one. Why should I even try? The why should I even try is when we're telling the helpless story. So I'm going to give us, and I'm going to apologize because this is going to be stuck in your head all day. You're welcome. Okay, raise a hand. Who's seen Encanto? Okay, I have learned that like my bias of knowing and seeing this movie umpteen times, that, okay, I have to give a little disclaimer. Bruno, he's part of a family and they all have a special gift. His is that he can see the future. You'll see other people have gifts. There's a shapeshifter. So you'll think it's Bruno, but it's actually the nephew. The sister's gift is that her emotions turn into weather. And there's a niece and she can hear things. So we're going to see, I want you just to listen for any character. What are they seeing and hearing? What story have they told? What feeling has that arose and how do they act? Well, it's just the regular song, but with it, the different characters, do you mind trying to figure that out? Oh, okay. So the different characters, there's a part where it says, Bruno told me my fish would die, and the next day he's dead. He told me I'd grow a gut, and just like he said, and then he's like, got this gut. And then he told me I'd lose my hair. And so that's what they're hearing, and then they're seeing it happen. And what story did they tell themselves? That Bruno made it happen, that he had this vendetta against them. But what's Bruno's gift? He can see the future. So he's not creating these situations. He's just foreseeing them. And what they acted on is they shunned him, and he literally hid in the walls of the house. He's a great guy though. And I was watching this with my kids and I was like, oh, they told a story. And my kids are like, yeah, it's Encanto, Mom. It's a story. It's a movie. But what story did they tell? What story were they telling themselves about Bruno? He caused it. So were they victims, villains, or helpless? They were victims, but they all together. Oh my gosh, I sometimes have my thing together. Okay, they made him a villain. Bruno's the bad guy. We don't talk about him anymore. We all have parents that are Bruno. We have colleagues that are Bruno. We have students that are Bruno, that we have put into that box, and we don't tell ourselves the whole story. Because the same facts can tell different stories depending on the perspective. So instead of coming forward and saying this, and this happened, therefore, this is 100% what it is, sometimes that's right. But we have to have curiosity about what is the rest of the story. In there, we have to look for hot words. Here is an all story. LaRaesha, this is a story, it's not true. LaRaesha is not willing to do any of the MTSS process. She judges everything the team is doing, and she never thinks about what is best for kids. Okay, are there many facts in there? We're passing judgment 100%, and I am guilty of saying a similar sentence. Here's some facts. LaRaesha has said that she doesn't agree with some parts of the plan the MTSS team has proposed. She rolls her eyes and ignores the emails we send her. She never thinks about what is best for kids. Okay, we're getting better, but there's still some pretty harsh judgment there. We're going to go with mainly facts because we also know that we're still driven by an emotion, right? By an overwhelming emotion. LaRaesha has said she doesn't agree with some parts of the plan the MTSS team has proposed. She rolls her eyes in meetings and does not respond to the emails I have sent her. Does that tell a different story? Does that have a different undertone? How can we go back to facts? Because we are telling ourselves lots of stories because we're used to having the heat on us for being in MTSS. I tell people and they're like, oh, you do MTSS, cool. Okay, so we've talked about getting unstuck, boom, or pow, now boom. We've mastered our stories. Now we're gonna start with heart, just like this guy. The reality is we can't share good intent. Are you ready for this? Mind blown if you don't have good intent. Our kids, they see right through it. Our parents see right through it. Colleagues, we're not. I'm going to Colin, we're not idiots, right? We know it. We see it. We know when there's not good intent. If you are going into the conversation to win, we need to go back to step one. If you're going in to have control over the situation, it's not going to end well. That's not going to be productive. We have to have those conversations where we want to find the truth, where we want to find a win-win situation. That means there might be compromise, but that might also mean you agree that we have to come back to this, that we strengthen relationships. So what do your actions show? So I go back to LaRaesha, and she's rolling her eyes. What might LaRaesha be seeing? If I always see she's rolling her eyes at me, what's LaRaesha seeing? Me always looking at her in the meetings. She doesn't feel safe. I'm talking in the third person. It's a pretend character. I figured it's a safe name. I don't think anyone else in here has it, so I just went with it. And then you also have to ask, what is your intent for yourself, others? What's the school? Where can we ground ourselves, right? He said, let's ground ourselves in our why, but we have to look at ourselves first. We did that first before we opened our mouths. Now we have to show what our intent is. Things you can say. I'm not going to read them to you. I'll give you a second. Before we start, I want to know that my goal is to strengthen this relationship. Is a lot different than I need to talk to you about your behavior. Set your intent and they'll put down their guards to have that conversation. Also, what you can do is apologize if you've done something wrong. This goes for anybody, right? We are not perfect. You can apologize to your colleagues. You can apologize to your students. You can apologize to parents. And then if you're going to advocate for something, walk the talk. Show that you're willing. What did he say about servant leadership? If you're not willing to serve, then leadership's above you. Okay? So stating your path. Here are some sentence stems. In just a minute, you're going to practice them. Okay. With LaRaesha's story. Okay. So you're going to turn to somebody, and here are some stems. I appreciate this because it really helps walk through that conversation. How can we share our facts, tell our story, and ask others' paths? So pretending you're dealing with this obnoxious LaRaesha, I want you to turn to somebody and use these stems to get to a good startup of your conversation. So I'm going to give us about 3 minutes. You may go. I'm going to bring us back a few seconds early. Is it uncomfortable to start with those sentence stems? Does it feel natural? Not at first. I like to think of these as like lesson planning when you have a new curriculum or you have a new intervention and you have to practice it a few times before it feels really natural. Your conversation planning. We're thinking about it ahead of time because the more we practice, the more natural it will come. I also had somebody that said, if I say this, they'll know I'm not authentic because I don't talk like this. And I believe wholeheartedly that vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So if I go in this and I say, hey, I really want to have a conversation. I'm trying to grow as an educator and a person, and I'm trying crucial conversations. If I sound unnatural, will you give me some grace in this? I'm just really wanting to have a productive conversation with you. Nothing sounds more authentic than that. So if we go about it and we're robotic because it's new and it's unnatural, then it's okay to address that. It's okay to own that because they will already put down some of their guard because you put down some of yours. So now we have to make it safe. She feels safe, doesn't she? Okay. This is my favorite slide. I got it, right? I got these. If anyone wants to take some pictures later, my 4-year-old has no idea I took them. And so I've got till Friday to hold out on this. But safety is not about the content. It's about the intent. If I'm talking about what is the best color in a kindergarten class, and I go about it that pink is better than blue, is it about pink and blue? It's not. It's that what I chose is superior to what you chose. It's the intent there when I like, oh, well, I like pink. What do you like? Blue? Oh, that's a nice color too. That's different. That intent, it does not matter what the content is. It's how we approach it. What is our goal? So how do we know when people go to silence or verbal violence? It's about knowing what it looks like. As I mentioned, that verbal violence feels like very aggressive in that word, but it could be talking over you, monopolizing the conversation, belittling somebody's ideas. I mean, threatening, that's pretty extreme. I would call that violent, but other pieces aren't in there. I've used those with my husband. Oh, well, of course you folded the laundry. Okay, that's considered verbal violence. I didn't feel too violent when I did it, but it didn't make a safe space. Now, there is on the next page I'm going to show you. We're not going to take it now. I've got it linked. You can get into the bit.ly. There is a survey. I took the survey. It affirmed everything I thought. I go to silence. Like it was like really high. I had my colleague, she was like half and half, and like mine, she's like, oh, it goes up that high in silence. And I'm like, yeah, it does. Mastered 100%. So, but just reflect, what's yours? Because then when you're feeling like you're getting in to one of your unsafe practices, you can step back. And if you start to recognize that somebody is doing one of these, you can address it. Once again, there is resources for how you can do that, but I'm just touching the surface. So we've nailed some of these pieces. Now we're going to make a plan of action. Like I said, there are resources. Some of these I want to get into. I want to go through all the nitty and gritty, but they gave me an hour and I like to talk. We can agree to agree. That doesn't mean agree on the same thing. That means we can agree that right now we are not at a place where we can make a decision. Let's table it and come back later. That's okay. We can ask why. We know our whys. Do we ever open up the conversation for theirs? I see that you are hesitant about some MTSS pieces. Can you tell me why? Maybe they've never been asked. Find the and. Okay. So I see that you don't like that. And can we still come to an understanding? Can we still go forward with a plan that we both agree on? How can we do the and? How can we amp up? They are going hard with the acronyms. You're welcome. Here are some great tips and tricks. But the biggest piece is that when we leave that conversation, we aren't like shaking hands like, hey, have a great day. Thanks for that really good, crucial conversation. We have to have a plan of action. Who's going to do what, by when, and how are we going to follow up? If we're talking about somebody implementing a plan and putting that into place, and it's a content issue and they don't know how to do it, we know that we need to come and check back in, right? We need to give them the tools to do it. And then they're going to try it and we're going to check back in and see if they still have clarity. So we get the root of it. We're not just pulling off the dandelions. I hope that in this session, I have just a few more minutes and I want to open those up for questions. I hope in this session you leave and you feel like communication can be your superpower. Because it really is, this plan, this process, it can work with anyone. We can talk about the easy things. That's not a crucial conversation, but we can talk about the hard things. And if we have these tools and resources and we go through this plan, research has shown it's effective. It's effective in the small setting. It's effective in the big setting. Okay. So thank you. Here's your bit.ly, all caps, MTSS CC Crucial Conversations 22, our year. Any questions? Katie, do we have any questions from the Zoom?
We don't, not right now.
Yeah. Great question. So we have a lot of issues to address with, or concerns, I'll say concerns, with a certain staff member. That's where it goes back to your CPR. Is it a content issue? Is it a pattern issue? Or is it a relationship issue? What is stemming from that? So looking deeper, because I think that you can address all the concerns at once if we look at what is the root of the problem. Is it that we don't know how to communicate effectively with one another? Therefore, we're causing a bunch of little fires. Okay, it could be relationship. We have to find what's that root of the problem. If it's a pattern issue, so we're consistently refusing to implement check in, check out with our students, and we're seeing it over and over and over and over again, we can address it as saying, I see that you are continuing to create a pattern, or that you're continuing to have a pattern of not implementing this plan or process. That covers it all. And if it's C, P, and R, it's which one is going to make the biggest initial impact. Which one is right now the one you have to address? Usually, and what they suggest in the book and in the trainings is relationships. If at any point it's the relationship in there, even if it's P and R, if we don't address the relationship, we can't fix anything else because there's a trust and safety issue there. Does that help? Okay, great. I know you guys are all too afraid to ask, but you can take pictures with the extra cape and masks. I'm sorry, Zoom. I think there's a filter for that. Any other questions? Yeah. Great question. The question was, what if is this only effective one-on-one? And actually a lot of the examples that they gave in their content were team meetings. And talking about, that's where that like a look for the signs of safety, looking to see, okay, LaRaesha, I see that you've stopped talking. We need to pause on this. Can you explain why, how we can make this a safe environment where we can all work together? Also recognizing that verbal violence, once again, but if we're having, one of the examples was a leader that's like, okay, so we have this deadline. Are we okay with this? Does anyone feel comfortable right now saying no? No, we're monopolizing that feeling. We're not really opening it up. And so seeing what is your intent showing and trying to step back to where we're all communicating. So it's using all those pieces, but it is trickier because you have to be reading other people, a lot more people in the room. So when I was doing the training, actually a lot of people who were in there was a team that was doing the on-demand training together, because then everyone at the table is looking for those indicators. So if Hastings Public needs me to come on out, right down the street. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you do in that circumstance? Is it like a boundary that I respect, or is this a barrier that I want to press?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So what about if somebody automatically shuts down when you say, hey, I want to have a conversation? They're like, no, I'm not going to talk about it. That's where we look at that safety piece. And we say, I understand and I respect that. I would like to ask, what can I do to help you feel more comfortable about talking about this? How can I create a safe environment? And if you say, do you need more, do you want a little bit of time to reflect on this before we have this conversation? It's not okay, we won't have this conversation, but do you want a day to reflect before we have this conversation? Would that help you feel safer about having it? Respecting that piece, because sometimes people literally just need, some people just need time to marinate and think through. My husband's one of them, and it drives me nuts because I'm like, no, let's talk about it right now. And he just needs time to think. And we have people who just need to process before it is effective. So asking, I see that you're not feeling safe right now. What do you need so that we can have an effective conversation? It's hard, because it's uncomfortable for us to address that too, to say, hey, I see you're not feeling safe. Yeah. Okay, well, and my bit.ly is still on, my goodness. Okay, there is, if you go to this bit.ly, there is the evaluation at the end. It's also up here. I'm gonna escape out, there we go. So if you will evaluate, I am all about growing, improving. This is still a new concept that I am presenting, so please give feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like. Also, my email is attached at that second page. I also have cards if you want to come up and grab them. But thank you so much for your time.